Good evening, everyone. This is our first discussion panel. This is going to be covering the history and how the panel has come to the practice of Ashtanga Yoga. Each of the members of the panel are going to be sharing their story. And we're going to begin, continuing from Manju's segment, we're going to begin this panel discussion with David Williams.
Aloha. Aloha is like namaste or namaskaram in Hawaiian. It means hello, goodbye, and I love you all at once. So we begin and end with aloha. First of all, 108 thanks to Manju. He was my introduction to Ashtanga Yoga. We met and I saw him do first series in March of 1972. It was a shot heard round the world. I didn't figure it out. A student told me that idea of 6 degrees of separation. That meeting of us led to now every one of you here and more than 1 million people, I think, in the world practicing Ashtanga Yoga are connected to us in that meeting, because that's where the seed started and it spread everywhere. I'll tell that story tomorrow. That should be good for a few laughs. My story, I say I met my guru when I was 18 years old. I met my guru before I ever heard of yoga. But the guru is the one who liberates you. He liberated me. He told me, look around all these people in the world. Just because they're working, you don't ever have to work your whole life. You can have as much fun as you want, go anywhere you want. Your only limitation's your imagination. I believed him. I wasn't scared to fast, and I wasn't scared to sleep outdoors. At that time, traveling was easy. Before terrorism, you could enter any country if you had a valid passport. This was when I was 18 years old. The next year, I started yoga. I graduated University of North Carolina with a degree in political science in 1971. My parents thought I was going to go to law school. I had to take a little break first and go to India. I was so fat. I had heard about these wise men in India who got older and wiser. I looked around Greensboro, North Carolina. Everybody was getting sick and senile. I wanted to find a yogi. And I'll expand upon this story. I went to India. I saw Manju, and I'd gone around, learned a few. I've been now a couple years looking for the best yoga. I saw Manju do first series. This is what I was looking for. Thank God he spoke English. Afterwards, I go, Manju, I am your new disciple. We're in this ashram, he mentioned, Ananda ashram. I will quietly defect. Take me with you. And he goes, yes, take me to America. I'll teach you yoga. I go, well, there's a problem. I'm 22 years old and have about $22. I can't just take an Indian to America. But mark my words, if that's what it takes, it'll happen. Little did I know that within, I think, 18 months, he was in America. His dream came true. He wanted to travel. My dream came true. I wanted to learn yoga from him. But as he said, directly before that happened, I went to Mysore. I begged his father to teach me. I said, sir, I've been practicing yoga for 3 years. I've even taught a few people. Mind you, I never solicited a yoga student because at that time it was really bad, to advertise. Still, I go, but they found out I did yoga. What if I'm doing it wrong? What if I'm teaching them wrong? I really think you should teach me. He goes, okay, but you got to pay me a month in advance and you got to come twice a day, and if you miss one class, you're expelled. I go, don't worry, I won't even be late. I got nothing else going on except yoga. And off I went. He sat in front of me and said, I'm going to teach you a series of movements that's over 5,000 years old. It can be chanted move by move, breath by breath in Sanskrit. You better swear to me you will never change one thing about this. Promise, promise, just teach me. Okay, and I tried to stay true. You know, we were asking, do you change it, don't change it? I tried to teach it exactly the way I learned it from him more than 40 years ago. One of the things Guruji emphasized was daily practice. I have had uninterrupted daily practice now for 43 years, except now with Ashtanga, full moon, new moon, and holiday. I hope I don't fall down leaving. Anyway. At this time, it was me, Nancy Gilgoff, and 92 Indians. We were the only foreigners. Like I said, we had to come twice a day. Guruji's English was very limited, but he was a smart guy, and it grew. But a lot of the Indian students knew English, and they could translate, and they were really nice and friendly and welcoming. His brother Ramesh watched the afternoon class, and he was very good in English. He was 17 at the time. Guruji would have me come early and watch people practice and memorize what they did. And then, when it was my turn, I would start. It was a little room, 8 people at a time. As soon as someone leaves, someone would start. So I would start. I would do everything I did the day before and add postures. In the front room on the wall was the complete Ashtanga Yoga syllabus, which listed all the postures of elementary, intermediate, advanced A, advanced B, and the pranayama. A guy helped us translate it from Sanskrit. We figured out what the postures were. So now I knew the names of the postures, but I had to learn the vinyasas, the dance. I was determined to do it. I asked other students, does anybody else teach us beside this? And everybody goes, no, just him. And I go, oh my God, what if he dies before I learn it all? You know, I got to really put on the pressure. I have a good memory. I did good in school. I've been playing chess since I was 6 years old. Before 30, I made candidate master, 99th ranking in the world in chess. So I can memorize stuff. Anyway, so I would add 6 new postures a day. I had 4 months left on my visa. I learned elementary, intermediate. The day that we finished learning intermediate, after morning class, we'd go upstairs with Guruji and sit and do the pranayama together. I learned up through half of advanced A, and then my visa expired. I had to leave the country with the determination to get back as fast as I could. I'd been to India twice, never even been to California. So I hitchhiked to California, and I'll tell a story more, but I get a letter from Guruji. Dear David, I'm 58 years old, never been anywhere, and I'd written, I got asked to teach yoga. He writes me back, let me come teach yoga with you, and we can, no, first he said, please start saving money and help me come to America. I tell the students, they go, and he goes, and I wrote back and I go, I will start saving $15 a week and I'll bring you to America in only 30 years. I tell the students and they go, what does it cost? And I go, about $3,000, $1,500 each. One guy goes, I'll put up the money, tell him to come. Write the new letter. Dear Guruji, forget the last letter. Come tomorrow. He writes back and goes, Amma is not going to come. I'm going to bring my son Swami. He can help and he knows English. So Manju and Guruji came to America, stayed for 4 months. In this time, I learned the rest of Advanced A and half of Advanced B. At the end of the time, Manju says, don't tell my father. I'll tell him. I'm not going back to India. It took me 7 months to get in here. If I leave, I may never get in again. I see these Mexicans, they just come up and stay. I'm doing the same thing. I go, great, because I heard about Maui. You can take over Ashtanga Yoga and Encinitas. I'm going to Maui. Didn't know a soul there, didn't know anything about it, but I just heard it was paradise. So that's what happened, and Manju's been living in Encinitas since then. I go to Maui, and I'll tell you more of this story later. I managed to get back to India, learned the last half of Advanced B. I become the only living person practicing the whole complete Ashtanga yoga syllabus. This is about 1979. I realized I never wanted to be a yoga teacher. I wanted to be a yogi. One thing, the last night in Encinitas, Manju was translating. This was in Yoga Journal as part of Guruji's obituary. You might have read the story. Manju's translating, Guruji, as a big yogi to a little yogi, you've seen my friends, you've seen my life. What do you recommend for me? He says, each morning wake up, do as much yoga as you want. Maybe you'll eat, maybe you'll fast, maybe you'll sleep indoors, maybe you'll sleep outdoors. Next day, get up, do as much yoga as you want. Maybe you'll eat, maybe you'll fast. Maybe you'll sleep indoors, maybe you'll sleep outdoors. Practice yoga and all is coming. I must have had the biggest smile on my face in my life. And I go, yes, every other adult's telling me to get a haircut and get a job. You're telling me to practice yoga and all is coming. So I went to Maui, not knowing a soul. But like I said, I wasn't scared to fast and I wasn't scared to sleep outdoors. But I hate being cold. And I knew Maui has the best climate in the world. It never gets hot. It never gets cold. If you know Fahrenheit, it always reaches 80 and it never reaches 90. It is unbelievable. Anyway, perfect. So I've learned the whole yoga. I go, okay, I'm going to put this to the test. Also, I'd always heard Shiva takes care of his own. Give yourself to yoga, and like Manju said, if you believe it and have faith, it'll work. I went, I'd rather starve to death than go to work. I can, and so I continued practicing twice a day. I would get up in the morning, swim a half mile in the ocean, do the pranayama, 25, 30 minutes. I went 3 years without doing first or second series. I thought that'd be too lightweight. Except Friday afternoon, I would take it easy. I'd just practice once. And we'd take off Saturday, full moon, new moon. I did this for 18 years. I didn't teach a group class from 1980 to 2001. I taught different individuals due to Danny's niceness. He got me some great gigs with like Pavarotti and different people. So like I told my son, I was always earning, but I never worked. I gave my life to yoga just to practice yoga and all is coming. And like Manju said, here we are in Bali today.
Next speaker, we're going to move to Danny Paradise.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Manju, and everybody. I'll just tell you briefly how I came into yoga. I was raised in Canada. I got into martial arts when I was a teenager because of my brother. He was doing karate, and that led me to studying with a master teacher in Canada named Masami Soroka. And I think that really opened the door for me to be able to learn Ashtanga yoga. And a few years later, I traveled around the world when I was 19. I got inspired by friends that had taken a year off school and gone around the world and gone to Europe. And I decided that's what I desperately needed to do, was travel. It became a motivating force in my life. And I ended up in the Hawaiian Islands on the way back from my trip to Europe and to Asia. My first trip to Asia, which was also incredibly inspiring. It was in 1971, 72. And I came through the Hawaiian Islands and was amazed by what was happening there and the beauty of the environment and the climate. And I knew that I was going to come back to Hawaii at some point, and also Asia. And I returned to Canada for a year or so and was in university, and then decided I was going to move back to Hawaii. So I came to Hawaii 2 or 3 years, 3 years before David arrived. I was playing music. I play music also, and I was performing in Honolulu for a couple of years. But I felt like I was losing energy and some vitality. I hadn't discovered yoga. I wasn't maintaining a real deep physical practice. I was swimming every day, enjoying the beauty of the Hawaiian Islands. And then some friends came through that I'd met in Europe, and they told me about Maui. And they said that if I went over to Maui, I'd probably easily find a job playing music there. So I went over and ended up getting some work there and was living there for about a year before David showed up. But on the streets in Lahaina, we would see this tall, what we thought at that time was a really old yogi. Our friend Cliff Barber, we became friends with him. He had long gray hair. He was about 6'4", in fantastic shape. Didn't wear shoes. Some of my friends were studying Swami Satchidananda's integral Hatha yoga with him. So I met him and had some conversations with him and got to know him a bit. He was really old. He was like 43. I was about 23. At that time, that was really old. And so we became friends. And I saw my friends doing yoga, but I didn't try it. And I thought, well, that looks interesting, but it didn't draw me in. And then about a few months later, it was in actually the end of April, early May 1976. Everybody remembers when they first encountered Ashtanga yoga. This guy Cliff came by and he said 2 Americans had shown up and they were carrying this form of yoga called Ashtanga yoga, and they were going to give a demonstration the following day in an old seamen's prison. Wasn't that where the demonstration was? Yeah, it was a historical site. Yeah, it was a park, but it was it had been a former prison for sailors, criminal sailors. And so it turned out to be David Williams and Nancy Gilgoff, and I think Marsha was with you, and she did a demonstration as well. And they did this phenomenal demonstration of first, second, and third elements of third and fourth series. And there was about 35 young people there watching, 39 people, I believe. And at the time, very few people had anywhere to live in Maui. There was thousands of young people coming over, people escaping from the draft, and people coming to hide out, and young people coming to live, and of course the Hawaiian people themselves and the culture there. But very few people had their own houses. There just wasn't enough housing. So most people were sleeping on a beach and hanging out, surfing, swimming, looking for work. I was playing music at the time. And the next day after that amazing demonstration, everybody who watched the demonstration came to the prison, the Seamen's Prison, to learn their first lesson in Ashtanga Yoga. And fortunately, I felt at the time and still feel that David and Nancy were incredibly gifted teachers. And they taught us very carefully, very slowly. It wasn't like you have yoga classes today where you drop in, you're suddenly doing an hour and a half or 2 hours in a class. They taught us methodically like they'd learned from Pattabhi Jois. And they taught us the first salutation the first day. And we did it 3 times or 4 times. I don't think so. I don't remember. Believe me, 3 salutations felt like 10. And then we finished. And they insisted that was enough for the day. And then the next day, we came back again, and they added a little bit onto the routine. They taught us a few more salutations and went into the second salutation. That's how I remembered. And the finishing poses. And then they switched to a beautiful park by the ocean. So for me, yoga has always been imprinted as this beautiful practice to do in nature. And that was from those first classes in Hawaii. So we were doing yoga by this park by the ocean, a phenomenally beautiful place to learn yoga. And as I always mention in my classes, when you have an opportunity to do yoga in this kind of environment or outside, you learn it much faster. It's imprinted much faster. And it becomes a much deeper, more profound practice. You know, you learn it anywhere you can, obviously. And most yoga is taught in yoga studios and gymnasiums or dance studios all over the world. But once you learn it, you pick the place where you can do it. And if you can do it in this kind of environment or these natural environments where yoga came from, then it increases the power of it exponentially, and the force of it, and the meditative quality of it. So anyway, we ended up studying with David for 6 months, over the next 6 months with David and Nancy. So the primary series was embedded, and everybody in the group saw incredible transformation even within the first few weeks. Everybody kept it up, and I believe everybody in that group is still keeping it up. And they went to India. They were on their way back to India to carry on their studies. And so at first, when they told us they were leaving for India, everybody was kind of shocked because we'd had this ongoing class for 6 months, and then everybody panicked because what are we going to do now? But by that time, everybody knew the practice and was doing it very well, at least the primary series, as best as they could. And as you know, if you continue with the regular practice, then you see dramatic progress, endless dramatic progress. And I can honestly say that's continued for the last 37 or 8 years that I've continued yoga. It's continuous progress, never ending. And so then they came back 6 months later, after their journey to India, and everybody in the group essentially began learning second series. And over the next 6 months, we studied the second series with them. And then they left again for India. And everybody continued on in their own individual personal practices. And then 6 months later, they came back, and most of the group was ready for third series because everybody had continued a regular practice. So at the beginning of the third year, at least 15 or 16 of those students, maybe even 19 or 20, began learning the third series in Ashtanga Yoga, including our friend Cliff, by the way, who had first met David and Nancy and arranged the initial demonstration and classes. And he's still carrying on yoga. He's 82 years old and was essentially a sadhu, a Western sadhu. He was a renunciate. Like I said earlier, he had thrown away his shoes. He'd stopped working even before David. He wouldn't take money or deal with money. He was demonstrating clearly that you could live a magical life free of fear, completely covered and taken care of. And he was really an adept at yoga as well. So he impressed upon me many things. He was also deeply studied in the scriptures of yoga as well as the scriptures of Buddhism, the Kabbalah, Christianity. So he was going very deep into spiritual explorations. And he was also living outside. When we met him, he had 2 residences. One was a cave up in a valley, and the other was the graveyard in Lahaina. And that's where he lived. And he gave me amazing advice, but something I'll pass on to you that I've always followed was just, if you're going to teach yoga, teach by invitation. And I found that that has worked amazingly well for me for the last 35 years. Cliff went off to India in 1979, and he got immediately invited to teach yoga at a Christian ashram in Goa. Back then in Goa, as in Maui, they only had about 5,000, 6,000 tourists a year. Actually, it was mainly travelers. Same in Maui. At the time when David came, there was only 5,000 tourists a year coming. Now there's 2 to 3 million. So things have dramatically changed. And same in Goa. Goa gets millions of tourists. But back in the late 70s, Goa was a different world altogether. It was just young people. It was very inexpensive to live. There was no malls or hotels. Most people, again, were sleeping outside or in huts or small houses. And Cliff started teaching at this Christian ashram, invited by a priest there. And he had 50, 60 people coming from around the world every day, learning the Ashtanga Yoga format from him. And he was writing me letters to come and assist him. So eventually in 1982, I did go and began helping him teach yoga. And from that point, I started encountering friends, new friends from all over the world who invited me, as well as Cliff, to their countries in Europe and various places in Asia, Central America, South America. And my dream was to carry on traveling. which I'll talk a little bit more about tomorrow too. And so this was an amazing opportunity for me to encounter people who would invite me to their country, and when I arrived in various places, I found that it only took one person to open the door for this exploration of Ashtanga yoga. One person could initiate many, many people. So it was an amazing world I dropped into without seeking it at all, to be able to introduce these forms. For many years, I followed the principle that Cliff was following. I didn't charge. I just asked for donations, and it got me around the world many, many times. Later things changed as schools started to develop and yoga became much more popular. But this was how I began my exploration of Ashtanga yoga. So, thank you, David.
Oh, really? Next on the panel, we're going to hear from Mark and Joanne Darby.
So we'll go back to where my humble beginnings of yoga probably started when I was a child and I didn't even know what yoga was. But I was more, had the spirituality in my life. I actually wanted to become a priest, and that was quickly doused when I got a little bit older as a teenager. And so just like most teenagers, I was working, going to school, then I started to travel. And I was from Australia, living in Australia. And I decided, like most Australians, and I'll understand, that I wanted to go to the homeland. Maybe I don't feel like that anymore. But in the 70s, the homeland was England. And so I decided to go back to England and went overland. So my first stop was in East Timor at the time, and came into Indonesia, Bali, went up and ended up going overland. I ended up in India. And the first thing that happened when I went to India was I found spirituality. It was beautiful. It's like coming to Bali and you see people walking down the streets and doing pujas in front of the houses. So this is what India was like. So the spark was lit again. And, I only stayed, I think I stayed there 6 months and continued my travels. Never made it to England, by the way. I ended up in Africa and went back to Australia with the dream that I was going to go back to India. And I said, if I'm going to go to India, I'm going to do yoga. I still didn't know what it was, but I knew yoga came from India. So made some money and immediately went back through Asia. And again, I was heading to England. And I was with this girl, and she didn't want to go to India. But the desire for me to go to India was so strong that I said, you go to England. And I went to India, and that was the end of that relationship. So I went to India, and it was April. But I had one thing I wanted to do before I did yoga, and that was to go to Goa and just go to the parties. And as Danny was saying, it was a very free time to be there. You live on beaches, which I did. Threw your clothes away, basically. You just did, camped out. And so it was a long time to go, to April, and Goa wasn't going to happen until December. So first I went to Sri Lanka and did what all good Australian boys do. I surfed. Went to Aragon Bay, which is a great surfing spot, used to be a great surfing spot in Sri Lanka, and just surfed for 5 months. And then it was time to go back to India. So I went to India and passed through Mysore. So in Mysore, I'm now going to go to Goa, and knowing that I was going to live on a beach, I left all my possessions there. Left my passport, my money, most of my clothes, and I just went with a little bag and went to Goa for Christmas. And I'll talk about that more when we give our talks. And after the Christmas parties, decided that it was time to go back, but I'd heard about a place called Gokana in northern Connecticut. And the celebration that was going to happen there was for Shivaratri, which was in February at that time. And hanging around in India, this guy Shiva, this god Shiva, had become my god of choice. So I decided I really wanted to go to this festival and pay homage to Shiva and just see what was happening. And so that's what I did. After that, it was time to head to Mysore. That's where I left my stuff. And so I went to Mysore, and as I was driving into Mysore on the bus, I'm looking around going, where's an ashram? Where's some place I can do yoga? Because now I'm talking to Shiva and saying, now, after all this time, I'm ready to commit to yoga. I'm ready to start practicing. Where's my teacher? And so I go to the hotel, pick up my stuff, hanging on the roof of this hotel, and who do I meet? Same guy, Danny, Cliff Bar. So this old Cliff. At this time, he's 48 years old. Really old. 47.
Really old.
Really old. For us, he was like, wow, this guy is really old. So he says, oh, come and see my teacher. And I said, okay, I'll come. And so I go in, and Reggie sits me down and says, watch the class. So I watch, and there's something about this place. And you know, I'm looking for my yoga teacher. This is what's happened. This is where I'm led. And so after class, we talk, and I say, okay, I'd like to study. And he says, how much? And he says, $100. And I go, 100? I'd lived in Goa for a whole month for $100, and to pay all this just to take a yoga class. So I said, no, 75. And he says, no. And I said, okay, no, okay. So I leave. But something, I went back the next day, and I said, okay. And he said, okay, you can do it for 75. So he gave me the price. And he said, start now. And, you know, I'd been living around, no underwear, so he wasn't wearing any underwear, just a longie. And so I couldn't start. So I came back the next day and started. And that was actually a Thursday. So there's an Indian tradition, it seems, that you have to do, when you start something, you have to do it 3 days in a row. So I had to come back on a Saturday morning and do the practice as well. It wasn't very long. It was only Sarai Namaskar. I think the first day we did Sarai Namaskar A, B, Padangushtasana, Padahastasana, Trikonasana, Pajvakonasana, and then Padmasana. And one thing old Clifton said to me, he said, oh, he must really like you. He gave you a lot. So, and the next day was another posture-added. Then on the Saturday I came in, and then I continued until the next Saturday. I was so sore after like 10 days of practice. It was amazing, amazing. And so that was my humble beginnings. And we stayed there, basically. Then Joanne arrived 1 week later. She came up, and she can tell her story. But she arrived 1 week later, and I ended up by staying for the 3 months primary. And I was so sore, I just needed a break. So I took a holiday. I went away and travelled around India, went to Hampi, met old Cliff again in Hampi, just travelled a little bit South India, and then came back and started the intermediate. And then the next time I stayed 5 more months, and basically then I went for another holiday and then came back again. So in the first, I stayed there basically except for those 2 breaks for 2 years. And then I went back to Australia with Joanne at the time. In that time we'd had a child. We actually got married. Darby Jois married us. And those things happen when a couple of people just love yoga. It was meant to be. One of those things we just look at now and say if we ever met out of that kind of environment, there's no way we would have been together. But now that we've been together for so long, we realise it's the best match that ever could be. So we're kind of feeling very blessed about that. So we both went to Australia, and Reggie gave me his blessings to teach. And I'll tell you more about that when we start talking a bit more. And then we came back to India and basically said, okay, well, let's stay here. And we stayed as long as we could. Stayed until our money ran out. Had another child in India, second one there. And then completely out of money, we ended up, I had to leave, and we went to Canada and started to work. Ended up by working. A few months later, or a few time later, the yoga kind of went downhill just because I was supporting the family. And eventually things happened where I could stop, or things did happen where I stopped. the next day yoga started again, and I hasn't stopped since. And so it's been, a wonderful journey. Whether the yoga was there, it was still conversations with Shiva that kept me going. So, and we'll talk more about the rest of it later. So I can just say I'm just, again, like everyone here, we're just doing yoga, teaching yoga, and just taking advantage of what happens. It's just all coming. It's all coming. There's no regrets. So, thank you.
Oh, everything. Yeah, my story is different because I come from a different background, kind of. I stayed in school till I was about 25 years old, was not a hippie like these guys. From the childhood, I was driven to study and study and study, and finally I ended up finishing in pharmaceutical science at the age of about 24, 25, and so my parents were very happy with me, but me, I was not so happy. But my soul was searching for something a bit deeper. So for a couple of years, I worked very hard, and then 1976, I took all my money, gave it to my mother, and said, I'm just going for a trip. I just want to go away for a few months and I'll return. So if I need any money, I'll send you a letter and please send me the money. So that was came back basically 8 years later with Darby and 2 children. So how did I manage this? This must be God's will because but in those days, life was very cheap when you were traveling and you could manage to travel. And also, I come from a small town, French-Canadian small town out of Montreal, and India was out of question. You don't even talk about India in those places because they don't know where it is, and the fear of going to India, a woman alone, was out of question. So I just went to Europe first, and then end up in Greece and Africa and East Asia, and end up with a group of people in India that they just were going there, so we're all on the same plane. So I said, wait, at least I'm not going there alone. I'll be with some people. So for 2 years, basically, I traveled everywhere, India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and end up in Bali. In fact, Ubud. That was one of them, the last stop, and I said, that's it. I've had enough of traveling by now. It's been 2 years on non-stop traveling. And I read the book Siddhartha from Hermanus, and I'm like, wow, this is what I'm looking for, this kind of search for, something else in life that has more meaning than just looking around yourself, around outside. So I remembered of Dharamsala in India, and I said, okay, that's where I'll be going. I saw monks over there and in Nepal, and they were pretty cool. So I went to Dharamsala, studied with some Rinpoche for about 3 months, and the Dalai Lama was there in those days, so it was quite special, and I really enjoyed it. But after 3 months, my health was starting to go down a little bit because was in the mountain, not very healthy, clean place to live. And I saw someone doing some yoga on the roof. And I said, oh, what are you doing? He said, oh, some yoga. I said, where did you learn this? He said, oh, at Gitananda Ashram in Pondicherry. I said, oh, okay, it's going to be warmer there than up here, so just tell me where to go and I'll go. So I went there, exactly the same place as David Williams. Studied with Gitananda. He made me fast for 8 days and all sorts of things, cleansing and this and that. And so it was pretty hard core course. And eventually, after some months, I think it was Vishwanath, his name is Guruji's nephew from Bangalore, that came to give a demonstration. And I had already my Hatha Yoga routine. I was okay with that. I was quite happy with this, but it was the end of our course, and somebody needed an old man wanted his scooter to be brought up to Bangalore from Pondicherry, and he says, anybody here that can drive a scooter? And, yes, I can do that. So I drove his scooter to Bangalore, and he said, why don't you go to see Vishwanath in the same time? I said, oh, why not? So after a week with Vishwanath, or 2 weeks, he said, why don't you go and see my uncle in Mysore? I said, oh, why not? So I just went to Mysore. And at that time, I had 1 month left on my plane ticket to return to Canada, because in Bali, I decided that's it, I have enough returning to Canada. It's time to go back. So I arrived at Guruji's door, and ding dong, and oh, come for coffee. And so they served me coffee, and then he says, come and watch a class this afternoon, because the classes were there in the afternoon. So that's when I went to the old Shala, and suddenly Darby was there, and a French couple were there, Cliff was there, and maybe someone else. And I don't know what happened. I just...
Saw me and
I don't think so. In those days, he had that little thing on top of his head and skinny like a rake. It was like...
I told you we wouldn't be together.
That was not what so I just got hooked. I don't know. It's just like I just wanted to learn what they were doing. And then I don't know why, because I'm not a gymnast by nature. I never did much gymnastics or anything, but I was just impressed. So I said, okay. So Guruji said, you can't stay in the back of my house when this French couple leaves, because they were leaving. I said, my money's in Bombay. Don't worry, they'll give you the money. So he made them give me money to to stay at their house. And that was it. I never left for the next, well, we left in 1984, but my heart was there every day. And for me, my Guruji was like a total turning of my life. And I can never have enough love and respect for what he gave us. And after that, naturally, after I got pregnant in between, my first child, and I didn't tell him straight away. I'll talk more about that Thursday. And so the whole time I was pregnant, I practiced with him. And when the second time I got pregnant, that's when my mother said, you come home, you have no more money in your bank account. So that's why we basically left India then. And I returned in 2001 again. And I stayed another 5 years. From 2001 to 2006, I was hooked again. And we'll talk more Thursday, because we want to keep some stuff. But I basically stayed 10 years of my life in Mysore with the family almost. And I really enjoyed every moment I lived there, and I'm very thankful, because I don't know what my life would have been if I hadn't met Radha Jois and
me.
And you. Yes, probably. So it had been a very big blessing for me.
Bravo. Continuing next in the same magnetic Ashtanga Yoga couple, we're going to hear his story, her story, with Prem and Radha Carlisi.
Wow. Sorry. Great stories. Wow, it's so great to hear like the whole history there.
And her story.
And her story. I was introduced to Ashtanga Yoga by coercion. I didn't really want to go to the class, but these two women that were living in Encinitas, California, where I was staying at the time, they said, you got to go to this yoga class. And I was like, yoga? I don't want to go to yoga. I remember as a little child, at that particular time, there was 3 channels, and you had to change them manually. And I was flipping through looking for cartoons. And I saw this woman on the TV set with leotards on, this whiny music in the background, and she was talking very funny, and I clicked it very quickly and went on to my cartoons. And so I vividly remember that image, and I thought to myself, I'll never ever do yoga. If that's what yoga is, there's no way I'm going to do yoga. So when these two women came up to me and said, you got to do this yoga, because I was surfing and playing basketball and very athletic. And they said, you're going to love it. It's amazing. And we're doing it in this, it's a Christian church that was stripped of all the furniture inside and just carpeted. So the stained glass was there and the high ceilings, and it was like this amazing building. And I said, okay, I'll go. And they said, well, you know, your first class, you have to watch it. I said, okay, I'll watch. So I came in that particular morning, and the doors kind of, you know, opened up, and everyone was practicing Mysore style. And there was two guys there teaching the class, and they were students of David. It was Brad Ramsey and Gary Lopadoda. And so I sat in the corner of the room, and I just watched everyone going through their practice, and people were practicing primary, intermediate, advanced, and my jaw was on the ground. Just watching everyone, and just the beauty, the grace, the just amazing, and just the stillness in the room. I never had that feeling before in my whole life. I had gone to church, of course. I grew up as a good Catholic boy, but just the spirituality that was just there, and just the presence in the room and the focus. And these guys were just cruising around and helping people, and it also didn't hurt that everyone was kind of glistening in their sweat, and they looked really strong. And this was Southern California, mind you. It was summertime, and everyone was looking quite good. So I thought, wow, this is amazing. These people are so athletic looking, and they look so healthy, radiantly, you know, healthy. And I watched and watched, and then about 3/4 of the way through the class, I think Brad came up to me, and he said, so would you like to start? And I said, well, yeah, I could do a class. And he goes, no, it's not just one class. You have to commit for like a couple of months. I said, a couple of months? I was like, what do you mean, commitment? You know, I'm like 21. There's no commitment at that time. Actually, I just graduated from University of California in San Diego. And I was, you know, at that particular junction in my life, I didn't know where I was going to go. So I was in this kind of limbo state. And so I told him, I said, yeah, I have some time this summer, and I'll check it out. How much is it? And he told me. I can't remember how much it was at that particular time. I think it was like, what do you think it was? Like 75 bucks, 50 bucks or something? Yeah. I don't know.
Even less than that.
Probably 50 bucks per month.
That's
yeah?
about right.
So it was about 50 bucks. So I did 2 months, so it was 100 bucks. I had to come up with 100 bucks. It's like, that was a lot of money for me, but it was like, okay, I'll commit. So I laid down the money, and I showed up the next day, and of course, the way it was taught, the system was you learn Surya Namaskar. So I learned Surya Namaskar A, and then that was it. And I was hungry, I wanted more, and not happening. So I just watched, you know, that day, and then they just kept adding. The method was you just keep adding slowly, slowly. Even though I had the capacity to do more, it was just slowly, slowly, be patient, go with the method. So I stuck with it, and I stayed with it for several months. And then there was this buzz going on in the room. Guruji's coming, and from Mysore, Guruji. I said, what's a Guruji? I didn't know, like, what do you mean Guruji? So, and these guys were like, well, it's our teacher from India who's coming, and, you know, and these people from Hawaii are coming too. And it was like, what the, you know, I didn't know what I got myself into. And I came straight off the street eating hamburgers, hot dogs, you know, drinking, partying, smoking pot, you know, so this was a big shock for me. And then there was a lot of experimentation going on at that particular time with wheatgrass and raw food, and there was no internet, there wasn't a lot of books about all this stuff. There wasn't a lot of yoga books available. So we were doing all kinds of experimentation with all kinds of things. So the buzz was going on about the Guruji is coming. And so I was kind of excited. I didn't know what a Guruji was. And so the day came when Guruji came. And Amma was with him, his wife. Sweet, beautiful woman. Wow, she was so wonderful. And so they both landed. And then this tribe from Maui came in, all these long-haired hippie freaks. All these guys. It was Danny and David and Cliff, the old guy. I was like, that guy's old. And he was like, and I look at it, I think, what was he at that time, in 78? 46, 47. You know, I'm like, wow, that dude is old, man. And I watched him practice. I was going, wow, that dude's awesome. I want to be like him at 46. Now I'm turning 58, and it's like, okay, yeah. Yeah, 46. Yeah, right. That's young. Yeah, I'm like old Cliff now. People are like, old Prem, you know. Like, oh, he's still doing it. So these guys came in, and it was like our room swelled from like 25 people to just packed out the room. And then Guruji came in, strolling in, and he was what a classic character. He was so beautiful, so wonderful. Immediately fell in love with them, and the warning was like, okay, the Guruji's coming, and like just go with it. Like he's really strong, and he's going to be pretty energetic, and just go with it. Like when Manju was talking about Baddha Konasana, my Baddha Konasana was like this, you know. And I remember, I think it was probably Brad again, or maybe it was Gary. He said, look, when Guruji comes over and he gives you an adjustment, just go with it. Breathe. Just breathe. So I remember him coming up, and he just stepped on both legs. Just bam, bam, and just pushed me down. And then he let me go, and I was like a cartoon character. Just like spring back. I was like, whoa, man, what's going on? And in that time period that he was there, was it like 4 months that he stayed at that particular time in 78?
4 months, second time, pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a weekend.
So I was quite fortunate. Like I had just started. I was 3 months into it, and Guruji was there, and all these characters were there for another 4 months. So I just got immediately, you know, infused with like all this crazy yoga stuff. And I just went with it. I just practiced every day, and talk about being sore. Oh my God, that was unbelievable. I could barely, and again, I was 21, 22. I could barely walk. I was fighting, have you guys heard of Tim Miller? He's quite famous now. He's like one of the yoga rock stars. We were living together, and we would walk. It was like a half a block to walk to the yoga shala. And I remember fighting over the bathtub in the morning. I was like, I need the bathtub. And then walking to class and just like, oh my God, like so sore. But then, you know, a couple sun salutations, and it all kind of ironed out, and slowly getting better. But that particular time was quite special. Pistachio was around. Pistachio in the back of the room. He was in that era, and it was such a cool family, you know, just the hippie family doing yoga in Encinitas. And Encinitas was like, what a cool place. It was just like a one-horse town. There was no traffic light. Everyone was riding their bikes. This was Southern California at its prime time. And it was beautiful. We had like a private little cove beach that we would go down to, stone steps, and surf and just chill out and go naked and run around. The kids were running around. And this beautiful woman, Spring, was going to come. And she unfortunately hurt herself really bad, so she couldn't show up. But she was around, and she had like several kids. And one of the kids, Sasha, used to crawl around And just, we would be jealous. He would lay on his belly and put his feet on his head, and we'd be going, you bastard. We'd be working so hard to do all that, and he'd just kind of lay down and just watch us, you know, with his feet on his head. But it was quite a special time. I instantly got hooked, and I really loved the family atmosphere of it, just the connection and the Ashtanga family, you know. And that's what I feel with this conference is that, you know, a coming together and a bringing together and a carrying on of this tradition in honor of Guruji and everything that we've learned from him, and also what we're synthesizing too. It's an ongoing, you know, research, and it keeps evolving and changing, and it's been what a journey. And then Radha came into my life about, what is it, 8 years now? 7 or 8 years ago, yeah. And we kind of met through a mutual friend, Eagle. Eagle introduced us, actually. And I guess he saw something in both of us. He knew us separately, and he just said, you guys are going to be perfect with each other. And it turned out to be that way. Radha came to Sri Lanka. I had a retreat center in Sri Lanka. And our first year in Sri Lanka was the tsunami year. What a great year to start everything off. So she came the following year, yeah. That was in 2004, but it's been quite a ride. With her, and the Ashtanga yoga practice is definitely given me a thread of sanity through a lot of many challenges and roller coaster ride. So I thank the Guruji and Manju. Thank you for everything, and David and Danny for holding down the fort. And you guys, I met these guys my first trip to India with Pistachio, actually. We came to Mysore in 1979. That was, Guruji, of course, invited everyone, and I said, I'm taking you up on that. And I came with Brad and Gary, my art teachers at the time, and stayed in Mysore for 3 months, and went up north after that and got very sick and came back down, like, just talk about skinny. Holy crap. I was like, I should bottle this. This would be a good weight loss formula. Like, get a maybe a dysentery and lose 30 pounds in 2 days. So it was quite strong. But Guruji really helped me out too. When I came down, I knocked on the door. I made it back to Mysore because I felt so bad. I went all the way up to the northern India, and I came back down, and I knocked on his door. I didn't know where else to go. Who else do I know in India? So I came back to Mysore, knocked on his door, and Amma and Guruji came to the door, and they went, oh, very sick. And I was like, yeah, please help me, you know. And they kind of nursed me as much as they could back to health, and then sent me back to America. But yeah, I will end there, and there's much more to say. And of course, like everyone else is doing their little workshop, I'll add some more stuff there.
So I first wanted to say I feel really, really honored to be among this group, because one of my teachers is here, Annie Pace. And so I feel really honored to just be among these guys. So I started at a different time. I started in 1990. And I have to say I knew nothing about yoga when I started, nothing at all. I didn't come from a family that knew anything about yoga. My family wasn't particularly healthy. I grew up eating sugar cereal in the morning. So I had like a background that really nothing to do with yoga at all. And I was, in 1990, I was in Santa Monica, California. I was going to college. And for some reason, I felt this really strong pull to learn yoga, even though I didn't know anybody doing yoga and I knew nothing about it. So I went home from school one day and I looked up yoga in the yellow pages of the phone book. And I looked down the list and I thought, okay, and I saw this ad for YogaWorks, which is kind of funny because, you know, YogaWorks is now this huge corporation, but that's actually where I started. And my first class was with Chuck Miller, who is big-time Ashtangi. And I feel really blessed because that was the beginning of my yoga journey. And after my first class, I walked out of class and I said to Chuck, I think I'm going to be a yoga teacher one day. And I think he was kind of like, yeah, whatever, you know. So from there, I kept going to classes like Mysore classes and lead classes, and I just kept kind of just practicing. And I did that for about 5 years. And then after 5 years, I just felt this pull to go to India. Again, I didn't know much about Guruji. I didn't know anything about India. So I told my parents I was going to go to India. And the first thing that my dad said was, why don't you just go to France like the other girls? So I was like, no, I really feel this pull. I really want to go to India. And they were like, okay. So I had a job working downtown LA. I was working in the fashion business. And I dropped everything. I sold everything I had, and I left nothing behind. And I just went by myself to India. And, just like, okay, let's just see what happens. So I got there and I met Guruji. And I think for me, that was when the practice really started for me. Even though I had been practicing for 5 years, there was something in my heart that shifted. And that was, to me, that was the beginning of knowing my path. Even though I had said 5 years ago, oh, I'm going to be a yoga teacher, I didn't know what I was talking about. But then the first time I met Guruji in India, I could really feel I was going to just do whatever it took to just continue on this path. And so then 3 months later, I ended up traveling around India and just going to Calcutta and Rishikesh and all over. And so I spent a year just traveling on India on my own. And then when I came back to California, I just knew my life had changed completely. And from that point, I just made yoga the priority of my life. Daily practice, but also just studying deeper. And I just allowed it to just take its own. I didn't really have a goal with it at that point. It was just okay, I'm going to just see what happens. And little by little, people would ask me to teach privates, and I started teaching at Yoga Works. And I knew that's what I was going to do. So I kept doing that. I stayed at Yoga Works for maybe 15 years, and now it's this huge corporation. But Chuck and Mati were my teachers, and then I traveled to India back and forth. And then years later, met this man. But I just wanted to say, for me, even coming from a later generation, and to a lot of you, if you're coming from a background where maybe you didn't have any information about yoga, don't let any of that stop you. Go from your heart, go from your gut, because that's what took me on this path. So.
And our next discussion panel will be Annie Pace.
I guess I would be an Ashtanga child of the 80s, kind of the second wave, second generation. And before I go into my story, I just want to try to articulate what it feels like to be with all these guys, right? Because most of these folks I have seen over the years in Mysore, in various contexts, as teachers, as students, as friends, as peers. Some of them I haven't. Danny and David, I didn't meet until this week, but I feel like they're my big brothers, right? I'm amongst my big brothers and my uncle and my sisters, and it's like this inseparable family who came from the same guru. And just like we don't have choices in our siblings, we don't have choices in who our peers are and our personalities are and our lives are, but there's a really strong bond, and it just feels really, really sweet. So thank you, Prem and Radha, for bringing us all together. Yeah, so there. So once upon a time, in the 1980s, I was searching. I was dabbling in yoga. I started taking yoga classes in 1979. And I was in Colorado, and I was taking some of this yoga and that yoga, and I was taking Iyengar yoga, and I was searching, and I went to a lot of workshops and studied with a lot of teachers. And I loved all of it, but there was something missing. There was just something I was craving that I wasn't finding. And at this point, I was working in corporate America, and while I was sitting in the AT&T Corporation with my no-nonsense pantyhose and pumps and a suit in front of my computer in a little cubicle, you know, those little cubicles they have, I'm doing my little thing, and a friend of mine, tall man named Brad, pokes his head over my cubicle. And he says, "Yo, Annie." "What?" "I heard about this really trippy dude who's going to be teaching this yoga workshop in Boulder." I said, "Yeah?" He said, "We should check it out." I said, "Okay, fine, sign me up." So that really trippy dude was Richard Freeman. And it was when he was in the process of moving back to Colorado, and he had been with Guruji pretty intensively recently. And it was when he first started introducing the Ashtanga yoga into Colorado. So I got on that first Colorado wave of people with Richard. And as soon as I experienced one class, there it was. Whatever it was I was craving was there, and I knew it was the complete package. So I studied with Richard for a few years, and then the buzz started. Guruji's coming, Guruji's coming, you know, and there was a big buzz in the community, and preparing for Guruji. And again, this was, I don't know, 86 or 7 or something, maybe 87. And everybody prepares for Guruji, and he came, and you know, everyone's adrenaline, everyone was nervous, and as soon as Guruji came and we started class, everyone relaxed and went along for the ride. And after the first class, I went up after class to pranam to Guruji, and I go down and I come up, and he looks at me and he says, "You!" Yes, Guruji. He said, "You! Come Mysore." "Okay, Guruji, when?" He said, "You come October." Okay. It was very clear. I mean, so I came in October, and I remember that first trip. It was Navaratri and Dasara time, and there was only 8 students there, 9 students there total. Tim Miller and the Bakers and some California people. 6 people at a time in the Shala and Lakshmi Forum. And Guruji and Amma would serve us on the festival days on banana leaves on the Shala floor. It was so intimate. And that was 1989. And since then, it didn't take me too long to quit my corporate job. And I started waiting tables so I could earn my trips to India. And I went every single year for the last 25 years. And I'll be going there next week, as a matter of fact. So there's been an amazing opportunity for me to have consistency with the practice, with Mysore, with Guruji. And I really haven't skipped a beat as far as traveling to India, practicing at home, in spite of injury and oddity and accidents and, you know, whatever comes up. Anyone really can practice. So I've been blessed with the consistency over the years. And I didn't know what would happen after Guruji's death. It's like, would I still go to Mysore? And I have many connections in the community and the music community and all over Mysore. And the year after his passing, I went. And it was very clear that, yes, it's become my second home. And Guruji's energy is still there, very strong, but mostly it's in all of us who are carrying on. So what more to say? I don't know. So here we are. Yeah? How many years later? Many years.
We've just heard everyone's origin and how they've come to Ashtanga Yoga. And now we are going to hear 2 minutes from each of the panel members as to where is this going? Where is the evolution of Ashtanga Yoga? What happens next? We're going to begin this time with Manju Jois.
I don't know.
Moving on to David. Any idea?
Occasionally people ask me, are you surprised this Ashtanga has gotten so exponentially big over the last 44 years? I go, not in the least. The minute I saw this, I thought anybody with an IQ sees this and will go, wow, if I do this, my life will be better than if I don't. The intelligent people of the world are seeing and starting. Danny showed Sting, he didn't have to think twice. The smart people, the hip people, they're all going for it, and I think it's just going to keep going.
Next, we'll hear from Danny Paradise.
It's about evolution. Everybody adds their own voice, their own description of the practice. When you tell somebody what yoga is, you describe it in your own way, and that helps it evolve. I think we were talking about this a little bit at dinner tonight. If you teach yoga or you've been to any kind of yoga schools, you see it's completely cross-cultural. It's people come to classes who are doctors or teachers or hippies or lawyers or taxi drivers, farmers, school teachers, principals of schools. So what I'm seeing is you get a lot of teachers coming to schools. I'm talking about high school teachers and intermediate school teachers, university professors, and they instantly recognize the value of this in school systems, or what the potential value could be. So, and then you get principals of schools coming to yoga classes and recognizing the same thing, and then wanting to introduce these forms. Maybe you teach school yourself. Everybody spreads the word through their own circle of friends, their own family. So I see shortly that Ashtanga yoga and other forms of yoga will be part of curriculum in junior high schools and intermediate level schools, high schools, university programs. It's only going to continue to spread. It's an explosion of consciousness.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Mark and Joanne. Darby.
So let me see. When I started, Guruji seemed to be experimenting with us, and I believe we just all started going into doing as many postures as we could, and basically what was happening, we were just stretching and trying to be as loose as we could, and the deeper we could go, the better. And I think yoga in general and in the Ashtanga, it's going to change. It's going to go back to the roots, to where it really came from. We're looking more at internal working of it rather than the external. So this is where I hope the yoga goes. It goes to look and become much more of a spiritual practice rather than just a gymnasium. So I think this is what's going to start happening. So, and I've seen it starting, and let's give it all we can.
Next, Prem. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. When you think about when we returned in Montreal in 1984, there was not a single person practicing yoga. It was like a really out back type of thing. So, and now, I mean, when Darby started to teach fully in 1998 or 99, he was like the big star of the city because he was like, wow, Ashtanga, so cool. And now in 2012, which is hardly 12 years later, there's a school every corner of the street. It's like yoga has become like the biggest trend thing in I know in Montreal and around the world. So a lot of places around the world. So yoga is definitely taking over an enormous amount of people that are interested by yoga. So whether it's Ashtanga or any type of yoga, like Manju was saying, yoga is yoga. So if yoga helps people changing their consciousness or their mind, is all good. The more there is yoga, the better the world will be.
Prem and Radha Carlisi.
One of the reasons that Radha and I came to Bali is that we wanted to land in a place to establish a center that people could come and immerse themselves and go back to where they lived. We don't want everyone living in Bali. We want them to come and go. So they come and they practice with us and they learn the tools to carry on with themselves or with their teachers. So we're adding value to what they're doing within their lifestyle so that they can take it back and continue practicing. And they feel more empowered and they feel better. So that it's not a retreat center. It's not like get jacked up and like they're all excited and then they go home and it slowly disappears. We want them to keep that going, like integrate it into your everyday life. That's what it is. It's to learn the tools so you have a better lifestyle. So you're a better mother, you're a better father, you're a better son, daughter, friend, better person in your community. And out of that, the world is only going to get better. So that's the space that we're holding with Ashtanga Yoga Bali Research Center. We want to carry on the research, and all of you are like living books. When you come, we look at you and it's beautiful. It's so interesting for us to be connected with each person that comes. And you all have such a unique story. We just told our stories, but when you come, we see your story or her story. And it's beautiful. And we watch the story unfold before our eyes. And it's so rich and beautiful. And people are kind of like, oh, we don't want to go. But it's like, yeah, go back and keep it going. Keep it going. And then when you want to go deeper, come and check in and plug in and go a little bit deeper. We've been along the road a little bit farther, so we have some resources to kind of add to it. And then we can tell when you come back, we just look and say, wow, fantastic. You have been practicing. I can tell, you know. And so that's kind of where Radha and I are, and of course you will add to that. But that's kind of our feeling with what we're doing, and then everyone else is kind of adding to that all over the world with this particular yoga. And you know, I look as an overview of looking at all the different styles of yoga that are going on. There's some interesting stuff happening. Not so good, and some quite amazing. So we're trying to hold the space for something authentic and real, and keeping the tradition.
Yeah, I wanted to say, with this practice, I really want to see it grow and spread across the world even more. And at the same time, I don't want to see it lose its integrity and become a watered down commercial practice. Because I really think this is a really special form of yoga. And it is a little bit heartbreaking sometimes, like, to see the commercialization of yoga that's happened, even though I guess it's important too. But with this practice, like, I really think the roots of it are so rich, and the integrity and the foundation that this practice has, it sets you up for your whole life. So for me, like, I want to see it grow, and I want to see it passed on in a way where that doesn't get lost.
And Annie Pace.
I don't know where this is going, but I have an idea of how it's going. And the integrity and the roots and the foundations and the essence of this practice will be nurtured and maintained and passed on as long as we continue to have student-teacher relationships and actually allow our students to have real experience, as opposed to the commercialized methods of having a cheerleader leading a class, right? And this is what is really beautiful about this lineage, is that it is truly a teacher-student relationship, and we take responsibility for our own practices, right? And aren't dependent on some cheerleader walking us through. So that's how I believe it's going to maintain its essence forever. And it doesn't have to be a huge, extreme practice. I also believe wholeheartedly that if everyone on the planet did their Surya Namaskars every day and had a 51% sattvic diet and took an oil bath once a week, there will be peace on earth.
Thanks everyone for a very special opening day at this Ashtanga Yoga Bali conference. And we're going to meet back here at 8 a.m. for Mysore style Ashtanga Yoga.
Hello.